And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. You know who's doing really great? The Boston Bruins. Bruins, 4 in a row. My goodness, people were kind of getting a little scared there. Nice game in overtime win in Dallas. Very convincing win over Nashville. Suddenly, they're back in a huge win over the Islanders and then a nice win over the Senators, who they couldn't beat for a long time. Man, if Ottawa won again on Monday, my God, the Bruins hope they wouldn't face them in the first round. Jeez.
I mean, they are kind of making a push, the Ottawa Senators. I don't think they're ready this year, but that's a team that seems like they are at least trending in the right direction. Beyond their offseason additions, like that team has pretty good effort. The fact that was a relatively close game on Monday for a team on the second leg of a back-to-back, not too bad. That team plays the Bruins pretty tough.
No, not too bad. And I mean, you look at the standings right now. What's hilarious is Florida has moved into that first wild card spot, 64 points, but Pittsburgh in the second spot at 63. Then you have the Islanders at 63, Washington 62, Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa 60, 60, 58. So they're in it. They're in a little playoff push. All three of those teams, and those are three teams that look pretty good for the future. So interesting stuff all around. On the Bruins front, Jake DeBrusk returned against the Islanders on Saturday and contributed right away. Power play goal in the first 3 minutes. Typical Jake DeBrusk right in front of the net type goal. Boom. And you see it. It's a different team with Jake DeBrusk out in the lineup. You see him, the way he stabilizes the rest of the roster, what he provides in front of that. He takes a beating. He took some huge hits on Monday against Ottawa. And I mean, as we said this whole time, feels like getting DeBrusk back, pretty damn big addition to this team.
Yeah, I think it's night and day in terms of just where he fits in the lineup and what he brings. And it's not like this team is lacking in terms of offensive capabilities with guys like Pastrnak and Krejci, Bergeron, Marchand, Zacha, Coyle. All these guys have great talents, Taylor Hall. But I think what Jake DeBrusk does well is kind of what was the missing ingredient in the top six for the Bruins, whether it's just his ability to drive to the net front. He's really good at kind of finding those layers in the defense where, putting himself in position for rebounds when he's driving to the net. It's not just creating chaos. He's putting himself in good spots in case a puck bounces his way. Driving to the net, rebounds, all that stuff, tipping pucks. It's a part of his game that, again, it's not necessarily flashy, but it's something I think the Bruins definitely need in that spot. Sometimes you just need a guy that gets you those greasy goals or kind of can manufacture grade A chances by himself off of his own effort. I think you kind of saw that with his goal against Ottawa, where he kind of, gets the shot, gets his own rebound and kind of tucks it home. You need one of those guys in your forward core, especially in the top six, that can generate those chances kind of out of the blue. And he's shown it so far, right? This is a guy that's coming off of a reported broken leg, a hand injury, and he's right back at it with 2 goals in 2 games. And it's, again, just kind of going back to his strengths. It's just him playing his game, and you see him this whole year. He's been very confident. He's sticking to his game plan, and the results have been there for him. If he sticks with it, I'm sure there's going to be plenty more goals over the next couple of weeks for the regular season.
Dude had a playoff list of injuries, like when the breakup day, when they're like, I broke my hand, I broke my leg, I broke this. He had that just from the Winter Classic alone. But no, I mean, again, and we said it all along, and you think back, We've been podcasting for a long time, Conor. It's been years now. We always have fun doing it. But there was a large chunk of time in there, maybe not relatively large, but there was a couple weeks where he was on the trading block. Last year, we talked about him, the year before. Like, what's the deal there? I mean, you think back and to think that, credit to the Bruins for, hammering out an extension last year, and credit to them for sticking by him and with him. And this is what you get, which is dividends. You get production. You get something that, he offers something that the rest of the top six isn't as great at offering. And it's those dirty goals. And Marchand's fine at that stuff, but to the level that DeBrusk is, he just, isn't. And, again, just what he provides is so impactful. And again, come playoff time, when you're not going to be dangling around guys in a 7-game series, you're not, freaking undressing Jacob Slavin going for a breakaway. Like that's not happening. And to have DeBrusk there doing what he's doing is impactful, and you're seeing it, and especially the goal that the Bergeron line, the goal on Monday against the Senators. Marchand goes in, digs for it, beats, I think it was Zaitsev right out front to DeBrusk. And it makes me think, I mean, Conor, I think that line must be turned on to HelloFresh. I think they are, Conor. I think they must be, just the way the hard work, they look like they're eating good and they're playing so well. It must be HelloFresh. I want to tell you about one of our amazing sponsors, which is HelloFresh. Looking for an easy way to eat well and save money this year. Cut back on expensive takeout and delivery and get started with HelloFresh. You'll love how fast, easy, and affordable it is to whip up a restaurant quality meal right in your own kitchen. It is spectacular. It is scrumptious. I could not recommend it more. And I know, Conor, you are the same way. Now, with HelloFresh, eating well this year can be stress-free and delicious with over 35 weekly recipes. 35. Manny Fernandez weekly recipes. They have the options you're looking for to help you achieve your goals. Choose calorie smart and carb smart recipes, or even customize select meals by swapping proteins or sides, upgrading your proteins, or adding protein to a veggie dish. You really kind of get to customize, which I really, really enjoy. One of my favorites, talked about this a little bit, yogurt marinated chicken with garlic sauce. It's a classic. I mean, it's good. I just like the reliability of it. It's not.
Nobody beats that.
Nobody beats that. Nobody beats that. It's quick and easy. It really let me be creative with the fresh ingredients like carrots, lemons, cilantro. This dinner, it popped. It passed the eye test. It passed the taste test. It was everything. I'll be putting it in my week. As I said, I've been putting my weekly rotation because it's so good. And that's all thanks to HelloFresh. Want to get in on the fun? Go to HelloFresh.com/Bruins65 and use code Bruins65 for 65% off your purchase plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/Bruins65 and use code Bruins65 for 65% off your purchase plus free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. So now we get into some more fun stuff. Trade rumors. There was a report from Elliot Friedman. There's been some other rumblings and we've talked about Vladislav Gavrikov a little bit, but that the Bruins are very in on him to the point where it's really just cap issues that are holding them back from a trade. There's a question that comes from the cap issues that I want to get into in a second, but your first reaction to hearing that the Bruins were one of the big teams in on him.
Evan, my reaction was, I think it's my reaction to Gavrikov. It's one of those things where I think probably it's not fair to compare him to a guy like Chychrun, but I think when you look at this team and the way this decor is made up of, I think, 6 very good players that, if you're acquiring another piece and giving up a lot of assets to do it, which I'm sure we're going to touch on in a second with Gavrikov, it better be a worthwhile upgrade, right? I think you look at a guy like Chychrun, yes, you're giving up probably 2 first, a blue chip prospect. You might have to move like one of your starting 6 defensemen. But if it's a guy like Chychrun who is under term for 2 years and is a very good player, the writing's on the wall, right? Like
immediate upgrade.
You immediate upgrade. You are upgrading at a already very, very strong position and putting that group over the top in the middle of an already dominant year for your team, right? Like that's one where the writing's on the wall in terms of how you can just go all in for this season. Gavrikov, it's one of those things where, all right, you're looking at maybe he's a slight upgrade somewhere, but is it Grzelcyk? Is it Forbort? Is it one of those guys? But it's not like I think a guy like Gavrikov is that much better than a Grzelcyk or that much better than a Forbort that it justifies giving up a first round pick, another couple of draft picks. One of those things for a guy that also seems pretty committed to going to market. You've heard a lot of the reports coming out of Columbus is that, this is a guy that doesn't want to talk to a team that trades for him about a contract extension. So it's like, all right, you're giving up a first for essentially a rental and only maybe slightly upgrading at the position. It's not like
and a third and a fourth potentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the things too where people look at Gavrikov, big defenseman, eats a lot of minutes, a lot of D-zone stats, a lot of block shots, kind of like Derek Forbort, but
I was thinking that.
He's also not really like a Luke Shen, who's like has a lot of, I think, real nasty to his game. It's kind of like Forbort. Like Forbort is a big defenseman, block shots, kills penalties, but he's not. I wouldn't say he's overly physical like a Shen is, or even like a Clifton. Like there's nothing wrong. Like he still is very good at what he does, but that's kind of what Gavrikov is. So you're essentially acquiring a guy that it's not like he adds a whole different dynamic. He's a very good defenseman for what he is, but I think when you look at what the Bruins are going to have to give up for him for what is essentially, again, a rental, I just don't see it being worth the cost of what is only probably a slight upgrade on this group. And does that mean bringing in Gavrikov, you're moving out a guy like Grzelcyk, or you're moving out a guy like Forbort? Maybe it's added insurance, but then you could make the argument, maybe you should just get a guy like Shen on the right side, or a guy that won't cost as much for what is essentially insurance. So it's one of those where, again, you see how it would pan out if a trade like that does happen for a guy like Gavrikov, but I don't see him being a guy that moves the needle significantly in terms of bolstering what is already, I think, a very, very good decor.
It doesn't move the needle enough to justify what you're giving up, which again, they don't, I know if you win a Stanley Cup, we've said this a million times, it doesn't matter, right? If Gavrikov comes in and you give up a first and a third and a fourth, and you have to trade out, a roster piece, and you win a cup, fine. Like, so be it. But if you don't win a cup, and that was your upgrade, and you dealt away 3 big pieces of your future and a player on the current roster, it looks terrible. Looks awful. And again, I just think it goes back to, we've talked about this at length with Chychrun. Like, that's a clear upgrade. You're giving away, you'd be giving away, a first, Lohrei, potentially a roster player, maybe another first, maybe another top prospect, but it's a clear upgrade who has 2 more years on a very palatable contract for what he provides. This is not that case. This is very much not that case. And as you said, I mean, is it, Gavrikov, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, and then, if they don't trade one of the defensemen, is it, Forbort and Clifton, Forbort and Grzelcyk and Clifton? I mean, like, I don't know what you would do there. But that's a whole nother thing I guess we'll get into if they pull the trigger on this deal, which gets me to my next point. And this is something we haven't discussed a lot. Clearly the Bruins are not in the best cap situation. No one is. no contenders there with just like tons of cap, except the Hurricanes kind of are. But this team, is anyone tradable on the roster? And I'm not talking like, obviously Mike Riley, you got to, that money, or Craig Smith. I think those are the 2 obvious ones. But, I talked about Grzelcyk a little bit in regard to Chychrun, because I think that is a clear upgrade. Again, I like Grzelcyk. I'm not like anti-Grzelcyk, but Chychrun just is an upgrade. But is there anyone on this roster that you'd look at and say, well, if you have to deal him for cap space, you deal him?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's, as you said, looking past a guy like Riley or Smith, there's not really a lot of like contracts that don't justify either being of value to the Bruins, or they're guys that you can make the argument maybe they can move. But again, you don't want to really mess with the chemistry you have with this group, right? Where you have to move out 3 or 4 contracts just to, make the money work. If it means disrupting the locker room that's been gelling and has been cohesive all season long, it's one of those things where you don't want to it's kind of why we also said like a Chychrun move would work, where, you're probably dumping Riley and Smith's contracts and giving up draft capital, as opposed to moving Frederick or, guys on the actual NHL roster. It's something where you just don't want to uproot what's been going so well for this team. So there's not really, other than maybe a guy like Grzelcyk, someone that, you can move that contract just because there's not any room for them. But again, it comes down to the fact that if it's Chychrun, all right, he's an upgrade. For Gavrikov, it's like, all right, and again, I know people will push back and say that, Grzelcyk in the playoffs can be exposed or what have you. But still, like, I don't think it's also something where you need to then completely slot him out of the lineup, whether it's you go with 70 or what have you. If you get a guy like Gavrikov, maybe that works. It just comes down to, I think, the money not working out and just the overall cost where you're going to have to pay up to get a guy like Gavrikov who doesn't seem like a long-term fit. I think that's where the problem is. I think there's other ways for you to bolster this defense, whether it's swinging for the fences like Chychrun or doing a marginal upgrade like a guy like Shen or what have you, that makes just more sense for what this team is. Because, if you want to say the Bruins still need to get a guy like Nick Bukestad to add a little bit more of a scoring punch, maybe replacing a guy like Craig Smith on that third line, I could see that. Gavrikov is essentially another, like a Carlo or Fleurbert, which, like, again, they're both good players. So you add another one to the mix, he's good, but it's not an area of need. It's one of those things where it's tough to like succinctly like wrap up like what exactly is the pros and cons of this. Like the Bruins would get better if they got Gavrikov, but do they need him, right, for what the cost is? I don't know.
Do they get better enough to justify the cost? That's really what it comes down to. Like, do you want to not be picking in the first round, again this year because, you didn't, because you got Vladislav Gavrikov? Like, I don't know. I just, again, I can't sit here and say that I'm an expert on, I haven't watched every single game of the Columbus Blue Jackets this year. I think I would be sick of hockey if I had done that. I think that they're having a tough year. And again, I mean, you look at his underlying numbers, right? They're not great. Not great. So again, I just, it almost feels like there's, on one end, there's Chychrun, which is like an extreme, serious upgrade. And on one end, you have Luke Schenn, who is an upgrade to your depth, not going to cost a ton, doesn't cost tons against the cap. And then you in the middle, you have Gavrikov, which is like a weird murky area, like, like David Savard type, where it's like, I don't know, like Ben Sherratt last year. That was the big one, right? Ben Sherratt. And so I don't know. It's a weird place for the Bruins to be in. We'll see what ends up happening. Hopefully it doesn't happen before this goes live.
This episode drops.
Which to our credit, we are
the one who said it, Evan.
I know.
Who said it.
True, but I will say, in our defense, we are recording this later Monday. So there is that. Anyways, so the Toronto Maple Leafs made a big splash on Saturday night, or was it Friday? It was one of those nights. I think Friday. It was Friday night. Went out and got Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari, old friend Nola Chari. And they're calling him Cookies. Did you see that? They're calling him Cookies. And apparently,
I don't know where that comes from.
So I guess I didn't know where it came from either. So I was looking through the replies because people were also like, wait, what? But apparently, I don't know if this is made up. I don't know. I didn't fact check this. I didn't verify this. I could be completely spreading misinformation. And so I'm starting to think now if this is fake, but I think this is real. People were saying it in the Twitter replies.
Okay.
It said he eats cookies before games. So they call him Cookie. So I guess that's how that stems from. So I guess he does play a very energetic game. So maybe the sugar, it's like when a 12-year-old kid has like Sour Patch before a game and he's just like off the walls.
It's maybe like Jake DeBrusk with his Oreos. Like maybe these guys know what's up.
Or maybe Nola Chari, it's like stolen valor. He stole his idea, right? Maybe it's like,
That's true.
He saw Jake DeBrusk, he just copied it. So maybe there's something we got to look into there. But anyways, the Maple Leafs, I mean, that is an upgrade. Like that's a clear upgrade up front. I think Achari almost might be like the very underrated part of the whole thing. What he can provide, especially the goal scoring he did in Florida. But you look at those two, and clearly it makes the Leafs better. I don't think it's like, it wasn't a downgrade, especially Ryan O'Reilly. But I do wonder. I'm still questioning them in net to really. Yeah. What do you think of this whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, right? They definitely got better. I think Achari fits a need on the fourth line. I'm curious to see what they do with O'Reilly because he started off his first game with Toronto on their second line center. I feel like he's a guy that's better at this stage of his career to be like your 3C shutdown line. Like if you're keeping those guys, it's like, all right, roll out O'Reilly on the third line against Bergeron in like a 7-game series or against Tampa's top line and let your other big guns go to work. Like that's how I think you'd best deploy him. And it's a pretty good strategy. I mean, you saw just what O'Reilly did in 2019, right? Like he is definitely an upgrade if they use him in, I think, that spot. But as you said, is this like a move that's putting them over the top? I still think you have to have questions about that goaltending. And granted, guys like Samsonov and Murray and them have been good for extended stretches, but still it's not, I think, as even look at like how they'd be against a team like Tampa, right? Like who is the goaltending advantage there between them and Vasilevsky? Like it's Vasilevsky, right? Like it's until they win a 7-game series with those guys in net, I think you just have to have that natural pessimism or just wait and see approach for those grouping. It's just the way it is. We've seen it over the last couple of years, and maybe this year they finally break through and they did get better. But I think when you look at the shift of power in the Eastern Conference. I still think the Bruins are still the team to beat. The one move that I think almost feels inevitable, that I think is going to have other teams looking around the league being like, oh, is going to be what Carolina does with that cap space. Like if Carolina goes out there, they already have a very good team and use that LTIR money from Pacioretty's injury to get a guy like Timo Meier, then you're like, yikes.
Upgrade.
Right? Like that's something that, and again, Toronto is better, but when you look at just where these teams stack up and a team like Carolina that's already very good and has room to improve in a couple of areas, getting a 35, 40 goal scorer like Meier would help tremendously. So that's something I think a lot of teams, including the Bruins, are definitely keeping tabs on. But yes, Toronto did get better, but I don't know if they're necessarily in the same tier as the Bruins right now. And it kind of just comes down to the goaltending right now, just what we haven't seen yet from the ones once we get to the playoffs.
You have to feel like Carolina will do something, considering the Rangers went out and got Tarasenko, right? I mean, those are now feels like exactly. The two top teams in the Metro. You would, and even getting the Islanders getting Bo Horvat, like teams are doing things over there. It feels like the Hurricanes have to do something. It feels like Meier would be the logical move there. Obviously, you have to give up a lot outside of that, but it's interesting though with the Blues. Ivan Barbashev's an interesting name. Fluto wrote about this in The Athletic the other day, and it's an interesting move. It's an interesting thought because it would add depth up front. He's 1 year when he was with Jim Montgomery, he was had a career year in terms of goals and points. And again, I think the Bruins are full of third line centers. Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, Pavel Zacha, like you can go down the list. But it does give you a left shot center. It does give you a depth option. It, God forbid an injury happens, you can, you have a lot more options. It would take assets to get him. I don't know if you have the cap space to do that and a defenseman. There's obviously, Don Sweeney can make the cap work. Evan Goldham can do that. But it's an interesting thought. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that I think fits more of a immediate need. And again, there's a team that has very few flaws or weak links in their lineup. But when you look at third line, scoring punch, whether it's down the middle or especially, Barbashev's a center, but playing on the wing, he's done that the last couple of years as well. Seems like a guy that would make more sense for them to target and give up a little bit more assets for a rental than a guy like Gavrikov, right? Barbashev's a really good straight line player. Will add some physicality, not like a bruiser like a guy like Achari, but can throw his weight around out there. Kind of a weird player to gauge his value because I think what he is a guy that can give you 10, 12 goals, 30-something points in a bottom six role. Great value there. It's kind of what the Bruins are looking for. He also had that breakout season last year where he had 27 goals and 60+ points. I don't think he's that kind of player. I think he was shooting 22% or something last year. So that was,
that's sustainable.
Very much a blip, but still you wonder if that is kind of augmenting what a team like the Blues are asking for him. But even if he's falling back into what I think he's been for his whole career, which is a very solid, dependable third line, fourth line guy, you add a guy like him to the mix and he can slot in next to Coyle and Hall, or, you can bump him down to the fourth line if need be and add some scoring punch down there next to guys like Nosek or Foligno or Frederick. He's just another solid guy to add to that mix that gives Jim Montgomery options, right? It's not like you get a guy like Gavrikov and you're like, all right, we already have 6 good defensemen. We're just are we going 7D? Like if you have to slot out a guy like AJ Greer or Foligno or Frederick for a game or two over the course of a series, you can have that option when you have a guy like Barbashev added to the mix. So whether it's a guy like him, Bukestad, Bonino, any of these other kind of guys that aren't going to cost maybe as much, worth exploring. But Barbashev's an interesting case because you wonder if even if he's a rental, whether a team like the Blues is still going to be asking for a first-round pick or something for him just because of what he showcased last year. But again, I wouldn't put too much stock into what his numbers were this past season.
It's an interesting option. And I think a lot of people with the recent news on D, a lot of people are overlooking the depth options up front. But we'll get into that later this week with Poke the Bear, I would imagine. And people can also look forward to that from you over at Boston.com. By the way, congratulations getting in the Boston Globe on
thank you very
Saturday.
much.
Incredible. A nice story on Hampus Lindholm. What can people look forward to from you over there?
Yeah, we'll have you covered every step of the way with Bruins recaps, columns, breakdowns, features, all that good stuff over at Boston.com. Of course, we'll have stuff from the Patriots, Celtics, Red Sox, everything over there as well. So please read over at Boston.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. For CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.